necessary jobs. Many companies, local businesses rely on non-Bermudian expatriate workers and could have a difficulty if our Bermudian workers are not willing to step up and do what it takes to take on those jobs. Bermudians must consider the global economy, and everyone must be willing to do their part, ensuring that we give an honest day's work for an honest day's pay. It is time for us all to trim the fat, to live within our means, to hold each other accountable. I believe that together that we can make Bermuda a better place. We must all work together and row in the same direction for the betterment of our beloved Bermuda. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. As we all know, this is very difficult economic times. The Chamber's had a wonderful relationship with government going back many, many years, and it's to the credit of the Minister of Finance and now also the Premier that she's continued this relationship and continues to devote time to have an open dialogue with us. Throughout this period, she's always been accompanied by the Financial Secretary and now the Cabinet Secretary. And it's remarkable that through the good times and these far harder times, they both come along with an open demeanour and a big smile. I just want to draw two things, really to shape the background of where we are. I go from data because there are 60,000 people here, so there's probably 80,000 opinions. But data is always going to be a good start point to try to understand problems. 2 points, one local and one overseas. On Friday, the government also released the National Economic Review for 2011. For many people, it's rather dry, it's statistics, it's data, but it's a good read. It's on the net, so go and look at it. I'll take one aspect only, employment numbers. As businesses, we all fill out the manpower survey in September of every year. So for September 2011, the numbers, provisional numbers, are included in the book. So last year, in September, the economy ended up with 37,379 jobs, which was 718 jobs lower than the previous year. Now, what I do is I segregate the jobs. There's about 15 job categories, industry classifications, and I segregate those between those that are mostly performed in the private sector for profit and those that are in the support services, social, community, education, public administration. And that's not to say that there's a greater value being a banker than a teacher. I think most people would probably say the reverse is true. Sorry, bankers, I used to be one. But I look at those numbers. So the wealth creating, the people employed in for-profit organizations in September last year was 28,998. That's the lowest number since 1998. So one issue is we need more people working in the private sector generating profits, because it's those profits which A, pay taxes, B, service debt, and C, create our lifestyle. So reducing those numbers of jobs in itself is a bad thing, and therefore the task for us here in this room in the private sector is to figure out each and everything we need to do to make that number a lot bigger. The ratio between the wealth creators and the wealth consumers for 10 to 15 years in Bermuda was always about 31–32%. Because the private sector has been shedding jobs, that ratio is up to about 38.5%. So not only do we have not enough jobs, we don't have enough jobs that are generating income. Now, international business, we all very much know how much that is central to our economy. They shed another 210 jobs last year. They're now down to 4,077. In 2008, at the peak, they employed 4,761. That's a decline of 14.6%. And for those who were diligent in their maths classes, that's 1 in 7. So for every 7 jobs in international business, in September 2008. There are only 6 now. So why dwell on that? It tells us quite a lot about the local economy, and it tells us the difficulties the government and the civil service have of matching the needs and desires of the community with the ability of the community to pay for those needs and desires. And it's not purely in the public sector. We have those issues in the private sector as well. So let's just dwell on that for a moment. How does that really impact us? Well, here we are in Hamilton, and probably those 700 odd jobs disappeared within a mile of this building. So what it means is there are now at least 700 empty workstations. So what that tells me is I can advise the Construction Association, if they haven't worked it out for themselves, the likelihood of them being asked to build an office block in Hamilton is being pushed back further and further because there's already empty accommodation. So not only are there offices for rent, but some of the offices currently occupied aren't full, and when the leases are renegotiated, people at the margins will try to take less space. So there'll be more space, less rent. So that tells me that's a snapshot of our economy. The fact of the matter is it's contracting, it's getting weaker. So that's a domestic phenomenon, something that we can observe locally. And it's an important part of the budget process. We are in a different world now, and we have to look overseas. And because we're in the footprint of the US, although we might be 670 miles off the coast, we know that we can collect US TV programs off the satellites. But also we share a currency with the US. We call it the Bermuda dollar, and we print it ourselves. But the fact of the matter is, every Bermuda dollar is backed up by a dollar on deposit at the Federal Reserve in New York. The US, along with many other parts of the Western world, is in uncharted and abnormal territory. The US economy has been in and out of the intensive care unit onto the general ward for the last several years. One aspect of that really impacts us here, but it's a bit like a poison gas. It seeps under the door, you don't know it's there until you start getting sick, and then it kills you. And that's pretty much what ultra-low interest rates do for us. The reason why central bankers around the world manipulate interest rates is in regular times, it's a bit like an accelerator on the economy. Push interest rates up, the economy slows. Reduce interest rates, the economy accelerates. And there's a lot of empirical evidence that for 50 years that worked quite well. But when you go from the extremes, normally interest rates go between 4 and 7, 8%. When you go down to 0, all of a sudden the rules of the road don't work, because the things you could ignore in everyday life suddenly become the dominant force. So ultra-low interest rates is an emergency. You use it after a shock like 9/11, or if there's a giant earthquake or a nuclear explosion. But it's short and sharp for 6 to 9 months. When you use it for many years, the economy starts to rot, because the essential difficulty is you're taking income away from savers and giving it to people who borrowed money. That's not a social judgment. It's just the mere fact that the people who haven't got the money don't spend it, but the savers changed their attitude because they have to consume. Where we are now is here in Bermuda, ultra-low interest rates affect the profitability of insurance companies. Insurance companies are the biggest sector of international business. So because their income is lower, they have to be more scrupulous than they ordinarily are on expenses. So expenditures in Bermuda are constrained by low interest rates. But the biggest social disaster is pension funds. Low interest rates mean it's difficult to make money on investments, but far more serious than that is the fact that you can't sustain defined benefit plans, because the liabilities, the cost of future pensions is so large that it dwarfs the ability to pay for it. And so one of the most heartening statements in the budget speech for me was the statement that the defined benefit plan will be subject to review over the next year to make sure it's on a sustainable basis. Bermuda is not alone here. It's a problem in every one of the US states, the Canadian provinces, and right across Europe. But it's a big issue for us. So that's really all I wanted to say about where we are. Thank you.